Today I want to talk about deliberate practice as a way of improving your skills at the piano. This is especially important for people who already have a certain skill set at the piano and want to get better even more. What is meant by deliberate practice? Well, as a general concept, practice means preparing. It's the act of repeatedly performing certain activities with the intention of improving a specific associated skill. Although this definition may seem obvious, it's crucial to distinguish between doing something and practicing it. The key distinction between doing and practicing is that we're only practicing something when we do it in a way that makes us better at it. So deliberate practice means practicing with a clear awareness of the specific components of a skill we're aiming to improve and exactly how to improve them. In regular practice, we work on a skill by repeating it again and again until it becomes almost mindless. We know that from sitting down at the piano and start playing. We play, and when we make a mistake, we might start all over again and hope the mistake goes away. Deliberate practice, on the other hand, is a laser-focused activity that requires us to pay unwavering attention to what we're doing. While engaging in deliberate practice, we are always looking for errors and areas of weakness. Once we identify one, we establish a plan for improving it. If one approach doesn't work, we keep trying new ones until something does. The more we engage in deliberate practice, the greater our capabilities become. Many of us spend a lot of time each week practicing different skills in our lives. But we don't automatically get better just because we repeat the same actions and behaviors, even if we spend hours per day doing it. If we want to improve a skill, we need to know what exactly has to change and what might get us there. Otherwise, we reach a point at which no more improvement is possible. Regular practice works for reinforcing and maintaining skills. It can also help us improve skills, particularly in the early stages of learning something. However, deliberate practice is the only way to reach expert level performance, overcome plateaus in our skill level, and improve at a skill much faster than through regular practice. If you're just doing something for fun and don't care about constantly improving at it, you don't need deliberate practice. Not everything in life is a competition, but if you want to keep getting better at something as fast as possible or reach an expert level, deliberate practice is vital. As humans, we are wired to want to do the easiest thing at all times in order to conserve energy. In other words, it's in our nature to be lazy. We can't expect constant improvement if we keep repeating elements of a skill we already know how to do easily. That's only enough if we're just having fun or want to reinforce our habits. Deliberate practice is structured to improve specific elements of a skill through defined techniques. You have to focus above all on what you can't do. You have to look for those weaknesses and then target them. At every stage, you should set measurable goals to see if the practice is effective. You should always begin a practice session with a plan in mind. You need to know what you're working on, why, and how you intend to improve it. And you also need a way to tell if your approach isn't working and if you need to try a new tactic. Once you reach your goal for that particular component of the skill, it's time to identify a new area of weakness to work on next. The most important thing is to always go into practice with a plan for what you're working on and how. Knowing what you're doing next is the best way to stay on track and avoid mindless time wasting. Deliberate practice requires us to keep targeting our weakest areas, which means spending time doing stuff we're not good at. This can feel pretty miserable, but the quickest route to improvement involves stepping outside of our comfort zones. If you never push yourself beyond your comfort zone, you will never improve. I pushed myself out of my comfort zone by announcing this Beethoven Challenge. A quick way to find out if you're doing deliberate practice or just regular practice is to ask yourself if you feel bored or if you zone out during practice sessions. If the answer is yes, then you're probably not practicing deliberately. As soon as practicing a skill gets comfortable, it's time to change something. A common deliberate practice mistake is to plan a long practice session. It's far more effective to engage in sprints, practice with the most intense focus you can manage for short periods of time, then take breaks. Because deliberate practice is very tiring, you have to devote a lot of time to recovery. Even just a single hour per day of deliberate practice is enough time to make substantial improvements, especially when we're consistent with committing to it over a long period of time. When you feel yourself getting tired or hitting a roadblock during deliberate practice, don't keep pushing for too long. You want to be stretching yourself, but not exhausting yourself. Instead, switch to a more relaxing activity for at least 5 minutes. You'll likely come back to practice with new connections or at least feeling relaxed and refreshed. Practicing something without knowing whether you are getting better at it is pointless. Yet that is what most of us do every day without thinking. We just sit down at the piano and start playing. As we saw before, deliberate practice involves continuously stretching yourself to improve on weak areas of a skill. For that to work, you require constant feedback about your current level of performance so that you can find out what works and what doesn't. That's why it's most effective when having some kind of coach or teacher at your side who can give you feedback, point out errors or suggest other techniques for improvement, and also provide motivation. Although getting better at playing piano requires a lot of time practicing alone, working with a coach at least some of the time is incredibly valuable. You can be your own coach by recording yourself and analyzing your playing. That is something I can't recommend enough. You should do that at least once a week and then check what you did and analyze it. Deliberate practice requires a lot of motivation, but that motivation needs to be intrinsic, meaning that it comes from inside of you. The need for intrinsic motivation is one reason why children who are pushed to develop a skill from a young age by their parents don't always end up reaching a high level of performance and often quit as soon as they can. And also another reason why rest is important for deliberate practice is because it helps sustain your motivation. The deeper we focus during deliberate practice sessions, the more we get out of them. If you can pay attention for only 5 minutes in practice, then take a break every 5 minutes. Productive practice is about how present you can stay with your intention and is measured in the quality of the practice session and not the amount of time that you practiced. Practicing the right things is at the core of the theory of deliberate practice. Figure out which practice activities have the biggest influence on your performance and plan to engage in those first before you even consider activities that offer marginal gains. By engaging in deliberate practice on a regular basis, even if each practice session is short, we use the power of the spacing effect. Once we learn something through spaced repetition, it actually sticks with us. After a certain point, we may only need to revisit it every few years to keep our knowledge fresh. Even if we seem to forget something between repetitions, it later proves easier to relearn. If you're okay with your current level of skill or just doing something for fun, you don't necessarily need to engage in deliberate practice, as I said before. But if you really want to keep improving your skills at the piano, or overcome a plateau, or even want to learn quicker, you'll strongly benefit from deliberate practice sessions. So what I would normally do is I play through one movement and see where are the certain things that still need my attention. And then I focus on those parts. In the case of the Sonata Opus 2 number 1 in F minor from Beethoven that I study at the moment, those tricky parts for me are these parts here. You see, I already made a few mistakes. So what I would do is, that's the part I will focus on in my first session. And I would do that for the second movement as well as for the third movement. and of course for the last movement, which is the most difficult part. If I look at the last movement, so the left hand here is the most tricky thing. So this is a thing that will have the most of my attention in the practice session now. All right, so like I said, if you're just having fun playing the piano or if you are happy with the level that you're at, then you don't have to do deliberate practice. But if you really want to improve, then look at the things that you're trying to practice. Find the weakest link, the weakest things, your weaknesses, the toughest parts in the piece, and focus on that. Short sessions are good enough, but keep your focus. Thanks for listening and see you soon.